Stuart Spector. We're at the Spector Workshop near Woodstock, New York. And here we are in our final assembly area. This is Jimmy Eppert, who is, wave to the folks, Jimmy. That's it. He is working on the first USA left-handed bass that we've made. This is going to a customer in Prague, Czech Republic, and it's a 6-string, long scale, left-handed, and a beautiful green high-gloss finish. And Jimmy is putting the electronics in that now. We've been working on that for a while. Here is some instruments that are waiting for final assembly here. Forgive me for my arm, which is a little disabled at the moment. Here's a beautiful Ultra Amber NS2 in high gloss finish. It's just waiting to get the pickups put into it. This is going to Oklahoma to our dealer. And here's another, here's a beautiful, interesting piece. This is one of the 40th anniversary basses with the full salmon inlays. I can't let go of the neck to show it. There we go. And you can see the full inlays running up and down the neck. Here we are in where we have some of our wood supplies and parts. Here's another set of left-handed wings, which we just carved for another instrument we're building. This is quilted maple. You can see how fuzzy it is because the grain goes up and down. And this beautiful wood comes from the Pacific Northwest. Here's the other piece of that pair, which go together. And there's some more of these wings. This is a normal right-handed one, also of solid quilted maple. It's hard to, well, you can see where the grain is rough. That's where it's taking a different direction, and that's what will make it beautifully iridescent when it's sanded. These are in their roughest stage. Here you can see it a little bit better in this piece. This wood only grows in the Pacific Northwest of North America, from Oregon State down, rather up to southern British Columbia, and nobody really knows what produces it. But it's beautiful and it's highly in demand. Here we have a few other, here's a body, one of our Coda bass bodies with a quilted maple top that's sanded, so you can see a little better idea of what it looks like. And over here, let me show you some other things. This is graphite, carbon fiber, that goes into the necks in addition to the truss rod. These are called pultrusions because they're made from thousands of strands of carbon fiber, which are pulled through a heated nozzle and injected with epoxy at the same time, so that they're all running in the same direction and they're very strong. And this material is as strong and stiff as a piece of steel, but it only weighs 20% of the weight of a comparable piece of steel. So we put 4 of these pieces of graphite into each of the necks in addition to the truss rod. And the truss rods are basically this type of truss rod here, which is a heavy-duty dual action rod that adjusts in both directions, gets covered with a plastic sheathing, but this will adjust the neck whether it needs to be adjusted forward or back, and is considerably stiff all by itself. Here is our CNC machine, which is made by the Fedal company. It was made in the USA. This machine was made in 1991, and right now it's set up to cut the fret slots in the fingerboard. And it's cutting the fret slots with a cutter that is 0.6 millimeters in diameter, which is 22 thousandths of an inch. The cutter head there is a special high-speed electric spindle that's turning at 45,000 RPM, And the noise that you hear in the background is really the vacuum pump. The spindle itself is so quiet that you can barely hear it running, and it's a wonderful tool. We do a lot of different operations with the CNC machine, carving necks and carving bodies and doing inlay work and drilling holes, and it's an incredibly versatile machine. It's programmed with computer programs, starts with 3D digital drawings. We work in a program called Rhinoceros, and then it translates that into machine paths that the machine can understand. And this machine can choose from up to 21 different cutters or drills, which can be used for any operation. And there are some operations where it'll go through 4 or 5 different cutters to make a body or parts of a neck. Here we can see on the screen it's reading the code, and the code is simply numbers in the X, Y, and Z coordinates. And as it's going through, it's following those commands, which are translated to the motors in the machine to control the direction it goes. So even though there's thousands of bits of information, it really comes down to X, Y, and Z coordinates. Here are some neck blanks which are in process for the next run, and here you can see the carbon fiber, the graphite, which is 2 pieces in each one of these slots, and the truss rod, which is covered with a piece of cleared tape here to keep the glue off of it. We glue the fingerboards on with epoxy because we're using a rosewood, and so it cements the whole thing together, and this tape keeps the epoxy from interfering with the action of the truss rod. So these are getting loaded up. These ones here only will have 1 piece of graphite on each side because these are the Doug Wimbish models, which are narrower at the string nuts, so the width of a jazz bass, so these have less graphite material in them. This is Jim Quick, our production manager, and this is one of our few pieces of custom-made automatic machinery which is used to cut fret wire into pieces with the end of it relieved. So we use blind fret slots. Here you can see the tang of the fret is cut back so that it doesn't come out to the edge of the fingerboard. And we cut our fret slots so that they stop short of the edge of the fingerboard. And one of our engineer machinist friends in the neighborhood made us this machine, and Jim is now punching in the length of the piece of fret wire and then the number of pieces. He just hits start. It's going to cut 5 pieces of this length, and of course it needs to be reset. There we go. Here it comes. And it comes forward, cuts the piece off, and drops it into this little container here. We used to do this with a cutoff saw, but being that every one of our bases has 24 frets and we make about 30 a month, somebody was spending pretty much 1 day a month just cutting fret wire into pieces, so this is a much nicer solution. All right. Here's our technology for pressing the frets into the neck. This is a simple arbor press, and it's rigged with an automotive torque wrench which controls the pressure, and we tap the frets into the slots in the fingerboard and then just push them in, and we're able to control the pressure very accurately and get the frets like well aligned with each other before we even do the finishing process on the frets. Here we are at Calvin. This is Calvin's station. Calvin is doing finish sanding. on one of the neck-through bases here. There's many hours, even though we use machinery to make them, there's a lot of hours of sanding with handheld machines and by hand that go in to finishing them out. There's practically nothing in the world that has the quality of finish that guitars do. If you look at the finish on a fine guitar and compare it to a Mercedes-Benz, you'll see that the finish on the guitar is actually much better than on the Mercedes. Connor is hand sanding the final surface on the fretboard. This is a piece of Pau Ferro, which is Bolivian rosewood, which we've used for years, which is 90% as hard as ebony and very, very stable and strong. It grows in the Bolivian forests. This has been machined into a slight curvature. We use a 16-inch radius, and after it comes off of that, then it gets sanded with these aluminum-shaped sanding blocks to the final surface. And Connor put marks on it first so that he can see where it's been touched and where it hasn't been touched yet. John here, who's also doing the final stages of shaping around the peg head and sanding on this neck-through base here. This one I can see has reclaimed redwood for the back. And what do we got on top? We've got quilted maple on top. This is going to our friend Carlton Armstrong. And this is going to be a very nice lightweight Forte 5. And here's closing in on the final operations of it. Getting ready to get stained next and go through the finishing process. Here are some fingerboards which have already been inlaid and sanded. This one, a customer requested East Indian rosewood, which we used, and the inlays in it are real abalone shell, but it's a product called abalam, and it's made from the most colorful parts of the shell, which are sliced and glued together so that the color of the inlay is really consistent through the pieces and after we sand it. So you get really the best qualities of the natural shell. If I look at it closely, I know that this black line here is in between the layers, but somebody who didn't really know would never notice it. And I know that that's a little bit of glue showing between the layers of the abalone shell. These are Pau Ferro. There's an ebony board there. This is an interesting one. This is bird's eye maple from North America. We get this from a company in Pennsylvania. And this fretboard is inlaid with black mother of pearl. And the way we do it is we sand them, inlay them, then sand them again so the inlays are flush, and then we cut the fret slots on the CNC machine after all that's done so that we don't have the dust come back into the slots. Then they're ready to get glued on the neck, and then frets will get pressed in later. Here is some wings which have been carved for neck through base. In fact, this is going to Billy Sherwood and is going to be one of those salmon bases. He is taken Chris Squire's position in Yes and is on tour all over the world now with Yes. And this base will be done in about 4 weeks, so he'll be out playing with it. And this will be one of the 40th anniversary ones. This is beautiful walnut burl glued to black walnut from the Northeast. This walnut burl comes from California. Here's also a wing in very lightweight swamp ash for one of the Fortes. And there's another one in walnut burl down at the bottom there that's going to our dealer in Dubai. There's a couple of of our new Kenmare guitar necks, which is a carved body guitar that we've just started making. Among the people who have them is Aretha Franklin's Rhodes guitar player, George Naha. And this is Buckeye burl wings that are carved and are getting glued up for an NS2. There's a really beautiful piece of Buckeye. You can see the match on it is really good, and it's very hard to get Buckeye without major defects in it, because there's one you can see on the end, because it comes from the root ball of the tree, and so frequently there are rocks and dirt and other things that have grown into the wood as the tree has been growing. Over here in these carts are other neck-through and bolt-on necks that are ready for waiting for bodies to match up with them, and will get glued up into instruments or matched up with bolt-on bodies. And on the back wall there are all these pieces of plywood, are fixtures for the CNC machine, which are used to hold the different pieces of work in the same position every time. Because of the digital technology, the important thing is to hold the work securely and in the same place every time, but the shapes are all in the computer and are translated into the machine as it cuts. So it's a wonderful technology, and it's really freed us up to make new things and be creative and increase our productivity a lot. Pretty much anything that I can draw, we can now cut on the machine, which is a lot of fun. It's just a huge liberating experience to be able to think of something, sit down and experiment and draw it in 3 dimensions, and then be able to put the wood on the machine and start the process of making instruments. One of the things about making instruments is that you can have an idea, and then, well, you don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, and it takes usually a couple of months to find out whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, because it takes that long for us to get through all the processes in completing the instrument. But you can theorize all you want to, but the only way to tell is by going ahead and doing it. And that's part of the fun.